Those of you who follow my channel know that I am a huge fan of the adventure game genre. However, since I have started playing games in the early 90s, adventure games were not the only genre that I grew to love. I have always been fond of RPGs, both those released in the West that I played in my computer and also Japanese RPGs that I used to enjoy on my 8-bit and later 16-bit consoles. Being a fantasy fan for decades, RPGs, especially the old school ones, were the ideal type of games to let me immerse in amazing and vast lands where brave heroes traveled and beasts and masters roamed. My love for fantasy, and especially dark fantasy as I grew older, also made me get involved in pen and paper RPGs. When I came across TSR's Dungeons & Dragons game system, or Advanced Dungeons & Dragons as it was known back then, I became hooked and started having endless sessions with my friends along with reading a lot of the related novels. I was particularly fond of Forgotten Realms, especially in the beginning, and later on loved Dragonlance and the gothic setting of Ravenloft. However, when I came across Dark Sun, an often overlooked setting of Dungeons & Dragons, my jaw dropped. The complex backstory and lore, the politics, and the magic-ravaged desert world that made every day a struggle for survival had an instant appeal to me. As I dwelled deeper into Dark Sun, I wanted to know more and changed my pen and paper sessions to this setting. However, most of my friends remained loyal to the more medieval and Tolkien-esque Forgotten Realms, and I had to find other means to immerse myself in the land of Athas. To do so, I came across the video games that were based on the land of Athas, and this is the topic of this video, as we will cover the Dark Sun video games. But before we start, let's have a quick summary of what Dark Sun actually is and the basic story behind it. Now, just to be clear here, I am providing information found in official and public sources. There are numerous theories and discussions by fans regarding a lot of Dark Sun's story and metaplot, and many of them consider changes that occurred in later versions of the game setting to be non-canon. Dark Sun is a campaign setting of the massively popular Dungeons & Dragons by TSR set in the desert world of Athas. It originated during D&D 2nd edition as the Dark Sun box set was released in 1991. This campaign setting deviated from its Dungeons & Dragons contemporaries like Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk as it dropped the medieval fantasy genre towards a darker fantasy Dying Earth subgenre. A lot of fans call Dark Sun a post-apocalyptic setting, but to me, the Dying Earth term is more appropriate. You see, post-apocalyptic mostly refers to worlds or lands that have suffered a catastrophic event, an apocalypse, that ravaged them and made them inhospitable. On the other hand, the Dying Earth subgenre of fantasy or science fiction has the same end result, a ravaged desert-like world, but the cause was the dying out of the planet or world as time progressed. The exhaustion or depletion of natural resources play a key role in Dying Earth settings along with a key term of physics, entropy. A major theme of the world of Dark Sun is the supernatural powers called psionics, a form of magic that is manifested purely by mental abilities and discipline and not through the use of external tools or factors like arcane magic. The campaign setting of Dark Sun is played on the fictional planet Athas, a destroyed world devastated by magic running amok. The planet was not always an unforgiving desert hell. There is a fictional character called the Wanderer who plays the role of the narrator, and his role is to guide the player through Athas' extensive history using the Wanderer's journal. That history can be summarized in the following different ages. The Blue Age was the first, when Athas was a lush green Eden covered by vast oceans under a blue sun. The dominant race during that time were the Halflings, powerful life-savers and masters of natural life who could create anything they liked by manipulating nature itself through the use of the psionics. Their glorious civilization gradually became too involved in the use of psionics and the manipulation of nature, changing Athas for the worse. In the great city of Tirazi, the halflings try to manipulate the oceans to produce more life forms faster, but their experiment had a catastrophic failure, causing a toxic brown tide to swarm the seas, killing everything it touched and ending Atha's Blue Age. The Green Age had dawned as the halflings, desperate to save themselves and the planet from the brown tide, built the Pristine Tower, a powerful building that could harness the power of the sun to burn away the tide. However, in the process, the planet of Athas was also altered due to Pristine Tower's power. The sun changed its color from blue to yellow and the vast oceans receded to reveal a lush plant life. The halfling civilization declined and they withdrew to more remote areas of the planet and used their abilities to repopulate Athas, transformed to new races like humans, dwarves and elves. That period was also described as the rebirth. The next age was the time of magic that began with the birth of a rare and secretive race called the Pyrins or Peacebringers. They were powerful psionicists and very powerful druids that roamed Athas trying to make things right. Among their ranks, Razat rose to power by discovering magic through means unknown. As his powers grew, he took possession of the Pristine Tower, where he mastered his abilities further to two distinct ways: preserving, that was used to preserve nature, and defiling, a secret, dark way of magic designed to exploit nature. While he was teaching preserving openly, he kept defiling for a small group of trusted human students with high potential in psionics and magic who were named champions. They were also given immortality and the ability to draw magical energy from living creatures through the use of obsidian orbs. The process of creating the champions was performed with the use of the Pristine Tower and turned the sun from yellow to red. Next came the Cleansing Wars. When all of Razat's champions were ready, he put his ultimate plan in place. He assigned each of his champions to exterminate one race. Razat wanted to destroy all the new races except the halflings and restore Athas to its former glory of the Blue Age. As his champions unleashed their powers upon the many races of the planet, the years that followed were known as the Cleansing Wars. The extensive use of defiling magic unleashed by Razat and his champions during the wars desolated the lands, turning much of it into a savage desert wasteland under a burning crimson sun. A few races like the goblins and trolls were wiped out of Athas during this time. As the wars progressed, the champions came to realize that after the wiping out of Athas races, they would be next, as Razat would never accept their levels of power. The champions banded together, led by Boris of Ib, in a movement that was known as the Rebellion and rebelled against their creator. They used one of Razat's talismans, the Dark Lens, to imprison him in a shadow realm known as the Black. They named themselves Sorcerer Kings, marking the age with the same title, and divided the remaining city-states among them to rule over. They selected Boris as the one to serve as warden to Razat's imprisonment, and in order to do so and to have the power to guard him, he had to be transformed into a dragon. The ritual that transformed Boris into a dragon caused him to go mad and embark on a century-long defiling rampage, destroying what was left of Athas after the Cleansing Wars. The last stage, the Age of Heroes, is where the players are introduced into the Dark Sun story. Many Sorcerer Kings have been killed and others are being hunted by wizards and warriors. The various campaigns introduce new players to the ravaged and scorched lands of Athas as they embark on their adventures. A key element of the Dark Sun world is the extensive use of artwork by the great Gerald Brom, or Brom as he signed. Those unique character and landscape designs typical of 80s and 90s fantasy have become a staple of Dark Sun with their high levels of details and general dark fantasy themes. The success of Dark Sun and its popularity among pen and paper RPG players led to the use of the setting in various media. Numerous novels have been published along with a few comics expanding on the rich lore of Athas. The video game industry soon followed, and in our next section of this video we will focus on the Dark Sun video games. Now, before we go there, let me give you a bit of important information about the company behind every Dark Sun video game. SSI, or Strategic Simulations Incorporated, was a major video game developer founded in 1979 with more than 100 titles to its credit until its dissolution in 1994. SSI was founded by wargame enthusiasts and played a key role in the video game development of wargame and RPG titles during the 80s and early 90s. In 1987, they acquired the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rights from TSR, subsequently publishing more than 30 titles in the series, starting with Pool of Radiance in 1988. I will not exaggerate in saying that SSI once was to computer RPGs what TSR was for pen and paper RPGs. Most of its games utilized their Gold Box engine, and you can find numerous Gold Box collections available digitally today containing their full library of RPGs. When it comes to Dark Sun video games, there are 3 released up until today, all developed or co-developed by SSI. Dark Sun Shattered Lands is a turn-based role-playing video game that takes place in the Dark Sun campaign setting. It was developed by SSI and released for the MS-DOS in 1993. The plot follows 4 characters who serve as gladiators at the arena of the city-state of Draz. The 4 of them plan an escape to avoid getting killed in the arena and embark on a quest to unite the surrounding villages that are populated by slaves and raise an army against the sorcerer king Kalak that rules over Draz. This is of course the main quest, but there are also numerous side quests and a multitude of NPCs that provide a more complex story and plot. The game deviates from the traditional SSI Gold Box engine and uses an isometric top-down view instead, resembling that of the early games in the Ultima series. The emphasis is more on the role-playing aspect and interaction with NPCs and less with dungeon crawling as was the norm in previous SSI releases. The game uses a variant of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition rules, and there is emphasis on combat with a lot of strategic boss fights. Shattered Lands also incorporates elements unique to the Dark Sun campaign setting, including unique races like the Insectoid 3 Kirin and extensive use of psionics. The game was hastily released in an unfinished state and was later patched with bug fixes and corrections. It received critical praise for its complex world and mechanics, but the sales were poor, mostly due to the state of the initial release that caused players many problems. Data East was developing console ports for the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation for release in 1996, but they were cancelled. Still though, the game spawned a sequel. Dark Sun Wake of the Ravager is a role-playing video game developed and published by Strategic Simulations in 1994 for the MS-DOS and the sequel to Shattered Lands. After defeating the army of Draz in the previous game, the 4 former gladiators journey to the recently liberated city of Tyr. Although freed from Kalak's tyranny, Tyr is now defenseless against the ambition of the dragon, a creature that came into existence as a transformation of a malevolent mage. The dragon sends his powerful undead general, the Lord Warrior, to Tyr to conquer it and prepare for his coming. The heroes team up with a rebel underground group known as the Veiled Alliance and must oppose the Drakesons and the Lord Warrior while they are being secretly observed by the dragon through his crystal ball. Compared to the predecessor, the second game has a more focused and linear plot. Certain events trigger the opening of new areas that the players can explore. It has the same engine and basic gameplay as the previous game, with some visual improvements such as larger character sprites that can be viewed from a third-person top-down view. The focus is again on interacting with the characters and environment, while battles are turn-based and tactical. The game was initially released in floppy disks and later in a CD-ROM version that added digitized voice and music. It received mixed reviews upon its release, with fans and critics praising its user interface and setting, but also criticizing its difficulty and the fact that it did not bring a lot of new features than its predecessor. Dark Sun Online Crimson Suns is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game that was developed and published by SSI in 1996 for Windows 95 and is also one of the first graphical MMOs. The success of the previous SSI's graphical MMO Neverwinter Nights that was launched in 1991 exclusively for America Online's network led its competitor AT&T to approach SSI in 1994 and request them to develop a new game for their own interchange network. The game was set in the world of Athas, featuring a number of different races and a lot of NPCs. Characters could be built from 8 races and 8 classes, with the choice of an alignment limited by their class. The game generated random quests for players and had live events. Players could interact with other players through chat windows, and the combat was turn-based. Unfortunately, due to the fact that this was an early online game before the YouTube era, there are not a lot of videos with its gameplay. As a matter of fact, I could only find the introduction video and a few screenshots that I have now, as you can see. The development of the project faced many issues, especially due to limited funding, as SSI was near bankruptcy at the time. The team only had one artist working part-time, and they had to reuse assets from their 2 previous Dark Sun games, Shattered Lands and Wake of the Ravager, as well as other titles that were in development. The modified engine of the latter was used to accommodate multiplayer mode, but was also facing a lot of technical issues. In the meantime, AT&T closed down the network that the game was supposed to launch on, and the game was finally picked up by another company, the Total Entertainment Network, a service that had its own fair share of issues and never managed to take off. Crimson Suns was launched in 1996 exclusively to the subscribers of Total Entertainment Network. It was rushed and had many bugs and issues. The peer-to-peer networking system of the game, instead of the use of a host server, made it vulnerable to hacking that was massively used and ruined the experience of players. A major update that came 1 year later tried to handle many of those issues, and for some time the game was generating a decent number of users and paid gaming hours. The network the game was on, however, failed to catch up with the evolution of the industry, and especially the growth of online gaming that was not based on a subscription model. It changed to Pogo.com and was acquired by Electronic Arts, silently shutting down most of its games. Dark Sun Online was no exception. In retrospect, Dark Sun Online Crimson Suns was a big experiment for the early MMORPG market that may have missed its target but proved a valuable experience for the evolution of the genre. That was the full history of the Dark Sun video games that were released during the peak of the franchise's popularity. Interest in D&D and its campaign settings declined in the years that followed, especially for those campaigns that were not heavily supported by Wizards of the Coast, who acquired TSR. Nowadays, Dungeons & Dragons is mostly associated with the Forgotten Realms setting, and most of the others fell into oblivion. Dark Sun, however, still has its own dedicated and fanatic player base, and it is a true shame that we do not get to see new official games based on this amazing and complex world. I would love to know what you think about Dark Sun and its video games in the comments of this video. Have you played them? Do you continue to embark on adventures in this iconic setting? You can find a lot of videos in my channel about retro gaming and old school franchises, mainly from adventure games, but I'm slowly building a diversification of the content to include more genres like the beloved RPGs of the 90s and 2000s. If you like the content, please support the channel by subscribing and turning on the notifications for it. You can also consider becoming a supporter of the channel through membership. Supporters get exclusive updates, get to watch each new video earlier, they can vote for the content of new videos, and will permanently be mentioned on the credits of every upcoming content. Thank you all for watching.